Hello there everyone, welcome to Nightmare Narratives. I am your storyteller and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. My name is James McCready, and I need you to listen close. Friends, what I'm about to tell you will change how you see the forest forever. I've been a ranger for 19 years now, chief of search and rescue at Olympic National Park in Washington. In all that time, I've pulled 847 people out of trouble, kids lost in the woods, hikers who fell off cliffs, campers who got too close to bears. I even got a Medal of Valor once for saving a family from an avalanche. Point is, I know these woods like the back of my hand, and I've seen just about everything nature can throw at you. I'm 44 years old, came here from Scotland when I was young, used to work in logging, until a tree fell the wrong way and messed up my back. That's when I became a ranger. Good thing too, I met my wife Margaret at the ranger station, and we've got twin daughters, Sarah and Emma. They're 12 now, always asking when we can go camping again. Here's the thing about me. I don't believe in ghost stories, never have. The old Quinault folks around here, they tell stories about things in the deep forest. Giants, they call them seatco in their language. Forest spirits that hunt people. I always figured it was just stories to keep kids from wandering off. In 19 years, I've never filed a single unexplained incident report. Everything has a reason. People get lost because they don't follow trails. They get hurt because they don't respect the wilderness. Animals attack when they feel threatened. It's all logical, at least. That's what I thought until July 15th, 1971. That morning started normal enough. I was at the station, going through paperwork, when the phone rang. It was Patricia Hendricks, a counselor from Camp Wildwood. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Something attacked our camp, she sobbed. At Soul Duck Falls. It was huge, bigger than a house. It killed 3 kids. Please, you have to come. I figured it was a bear. Big, grizzly, maybe. We'd had reports of one in the area, probably hungry after a long winter. I grabbed my gear and called for backup. Ray Kowalski, who'd been with the Park Service for 15 years, and Todd Williams, a rookie who'd just started last month. The drive to Soul Duck took 40 minutes. The whole way, I kept telling myself it was just a bear attack. Tragic, but not unusual. I'd seen them before. But as we got closer to the campsite, something felt wrong. The forest was too quiet. No birds singing, no insects buzzing. Even the wind seemed muffled. When we arrived at the camp, my mouth went dry. I've seen bear attacks before. This wasn't one. The campsite looked like a bomb had gone off. A 40-foot Douglas fir was snapped in half, 15 feet up from the ground. The break was clean, like someone had twisted it with their bare hands. An RV was flipped completely upside down, its roof crushed flat. Tents were scattered everywhere, torn to pieces. Jesus, Ray whispered. What could do this? I didn't have an answer. I'd never seen anything like it. We found the first body near the creek. Tommy Morrison, 8 years old. I won't describe what we found, some things you don't need to hear. But I will say this, no bear did that to him. No animal I know of. Todd was bent over some bushes, throwing up. Ray was taking pictures, his hands shaking. I was trying to think like a professional, but my mind kept going blank. Look at this, Ray called out. He was standing by the creek, pointing at the mud. In the soft ground was a footprint, not a bear paw, a foot, human-like, but wrong. 22 inches long, 9 inches wide. The toes were clearly defined, but the heel was so deep, it had to have been made by something weighing at least 800 pounds. That's impossible, Todd said, still pale from being sick. I measured it 3 times. The numbers didn't change. We found the second child, Lucy Chen, pressed against a tree trunk. She was completely flat, like she'd been crushed by something enormous. The tree bark was scraped away in a perfect outline of her body. Where's the third kid? I asked Patricia. She was sitting in our truck, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. Jamie Walsh, she whispered. He ran toward the old growth when it started. I tried to stop him, but ... double quotes. She started crying again. I followed the blood trail. It led away from the camp, deeper into the forest. The trail was easy to follow at first. Broken branches, disturbed, undergrowth. But then it did something impossible. It went over a 50-foot ravine, not around it, over it. I radioed back to base, nothing but static. My compass started spinning like a top. The GPS unit just showed location unknown. 2 miles in, I found Jamie. He was 30 feet up in an ancient cedar tree, arranged in what looked like a crude nest made of massive branches. The branches were thick as my waist, but they'd been woven together like a bird's nest. No way a human could have carried them up there. "How do we get him down?" Todd asked. Before I could answer, Todd volunteered to circle around and get photos. From a different angle, he disappeared into the trees, and that was the last time I saw him alive. We waited 30 minutes, then an hour. Todd was supposed to check in every 10 minutes. I sent Ray north to look for him while I went south. I was calling Todd's name when I heard Ray scream. The sound came from above me, not from the ground, from up in the trees. I looked up and saw something impossible. A massive brown shape was moving through the canopy, 80 feet up. It was bigger than any animal I'd ever seen, and it was moving from tree to tree like the branches were highways. I found Ray 45 minutes later. He was impaled on a broken treetop, 45 feet above the ground. His face was frozen in terror, eyes wide open, staring at something I couldn't see. There was no way he could have gotten up there. No way at all. I had to use climbing gear to get his body down. The whole time, I felt like something was watching me. The forest was still too quiet, and every shadow seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at it. By the time I got Ray down, the sun was setting. I had no choice but to make camp. I built a fire and tried to radio for help, but got nothing but static. The fire seemed smaller than it should be, like the darkness was pressing in on all sides. All night, I heard footsteps, massive footsteps, circling my camp. The ground shook with each step. Branches snapped in a steady rhythm, like something huge was walking around and around, just outside the firelight. I didn't sleep. I just sat there with my gun drawn, staring into the darkness, waiting for whatever was out there to show itself. When morning came, I found something that made my blood run cold. Around my campsite was a perfect circle of bent trees, 30 feet across. Every tree inside the circle was untouched, but everything outside was bent outward, like something enormous had stood in the center and pushed everything away. I was in the center of that circle. I found Todd 200 yards away, or what was left of him. His body parts were scattered across a quarter-mile area, arranged in a pattern that pointed deeper into the forest, like a trail of breadcrumbs, leading me somewhere I didn't want to go. That's when I started talking to myself. Not a good sign for a man alone in the woods, but I needed to hear a human voice, even if it was my own. "Think, McCready," I said out loud. 3 people are dead. 2 of them are your men. You need to figure out what did this. I remembered something Thomas Clenwater had told me. He was a Quinault elder who sometimes visited the ranger station. He'd mentioned the seatco before, forest giants that hunted in the old growth. I'd laughed it off at the time. I wasn't laughing now. The smell hit me first. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced, a mixture of rotting meat and wet animal fur, so strong it made me gag. I followed it deeper into the forest, even though every instinct told me to run. The trees got bigger as I went deeper. Some of them were so old they'd been growing since before Columbus found America. Their trunks were like the walls of a cathedral, and their branches blocked out most of the sky. That's when I found the clearing. It wasn't natural. The trees had been systematically broken to create a rough circle about 50 feet across. The ground was covered with bones, human bones, animal bones. Some of them looked fresh, others were old and yellow with age. I recognized some of the clothing scraps. They matched missing person reports from the last 30 years. People who'd disappeared in the park and were never found. I was standing in something's dining room. A shadow passed between the trees. Just for a second, but I saw it clearly. 12 feet tall, covered in dark matted fur. It moved without making a sound, like it was floating rather than walking. Then it spoke to me. Not with words, with pictures in my head. Suddenly I was seeing through its eyes, watching it hunt. I saw decades of people who'd wandered into its territory. Hikers, campers, loggers, all of them ending up in this clearing. That's when I understood. This wasn't just some animal. It was intelligent. It had been hunting people for years, maybe centuries, and now it was hunting me. The seatco stepped into the clearing. I'd seen Big animals before grizzly bears, elk, even moose. This was different. It stood 12 feet tall on two legs, with arms that reached almost to the ground. Its face was almost human, but wrong. The eyes were intelligent, ancient, and completely without mercy. It watched me for a long moment, like it was deciding whether I was worth the trouble. Then it started walking toward me. I emptied my service revolver into its chest. 6 shots, center mass. I'm a good shooter. I hit what I was aiming at. The bullets went in, and dark blood splattered the trees behind it. The seatco didn't even slow down. I watched in horror as the bullet holes closed up like water. The blood stopped flowing. In less than a minute, there was no sign I'd shot it at. It smiled at me. Actually smiled. Then it charged. I ran like I'd never run before. Behind me, I could hear the seatco crashing through the forest. But it wasn't running. It was playing with me. I could feel its amusement in my head, like a cat playing with a mouse. It started calling my name, not in its own voice, in Todd's voice, then Ray's, then voices I didn't recognize, probably other people it had killed over the years. James, it called in Todd's voice. James, where are you? I'm hurt. I need help. Then, in Ray's voice, Mac, over here. I found a way out. I knew it was the creature, but hearing those voices made me want to stop and help. That's how smart it was. It knew exactly how to get to me. But the worst part came next. Suddenly my head was full of images of my family, Margaret and the twins, at home in Port Angeles. The creature somehow knew about them. It was showing me pictures of them in danger, threatening them. That's when I got angry. I'd been a logger before I became a ranger. I knew these forests, and I knew how to use them. There was an old logging site ahead, with equipment still scattered around. If I could get there, maybe I could find something to fight with. I led the seatco straight to a deadfall trap I'd noticed earlier. It was set up to catch falling trees, but if I could trigger it right, the 2-ton log came down like a hammer. It caught the seatco square in the chest and crushed it against a tree trunk. The sound was like a car crash. For a moment, I thought I'd won. The creature was completely flattened, its body broken and twisted. Then I heard the cracking sounds. The bones were reforming. The crushed flesh was pulling itself back together. In less than 3 minutes, the seatco was standing again, completely healed. That's when I realized the truth. This thing couldn't be killed. Not by bullets, not by crushing, probably not by anything. It had been hunting in these woods for centuries because nothing could stop it. But as it stood there, putting itself back together, I noticed something. It hadn't followed me past a certain point. Even when it was chasing me, it had stopped. At specific tree lines, it had territory boundaries. I started backing away, watching its reaction. The seatco followed me, but more slowly. It was getting more cautious the closer we got to the park boundary. At the edge of its territory, it stopped completely. It paced back and forth like a caged animal, but it wouldn't cross the line. I kept backing away. The creature stood at the boundary, watching me go. Its eyes were full of rage, but also something else. Patience. Like it was saying, I'll be here when you come back. I collapsed about a mile past the boundary. 48 hours with no sleep, no food, no water. My body just gave out. That's where the backup team found me 6 hours later. The official report said Ray and Todd died in a bear attack during unusual weather conditions. The 3 kids from the camp were listed the same way. I was commended for surviving a dangerous encounter with wildlife. They classified all the real evidence, the footprints, the photos, the recording of my radio calls. Everything disappeared into some government filing cabinet. I tried to tell the truth. Nobody believed me. My own boss said I was suffering from trauma and suggested I take some time off. The nightmares started immediately. Every night, I'd see the seatco standing at the edge of its territory, waiting. Sometimes I'd wake up with the smell of rotting meat in my nose, so strong I'd have to check if something had died in our house. I moved my family to Arizona 6 months later, told Margaret I needed a change of scenery. The girls cried when we left. They loved the forests of Washington, but I couldn't risk them being anywhere near those woods. I took early retirement and became an insurance adjuster. Boring work, but safe. I refuse any cases that involve forests or wilderness areas. The worst part is, I still feel it watching me, even here in the desert, 2,000 miles away. Sometimes, I'll be driving down the highway and suddenly my head fills with images of the Olympic forest. The seatco is still there, still hunting, still waiting. I think our minds got connected somehow during that encounter. It knows where I am, and I know where it is. Some connections can't be broken by distance. The girls are grown now. They ask why I never want to go camping, why I won't visit national parks. I can't tell them the truth. They'd think their father had gone crazy. But I'm telling you now, if you ever find yourself in Olympic National Park, stay away from the Salt Duck area. Stay away from the old-growth forests. And if you hear voices calling your name from the trees, don't listen. Some things are better left alone in the dark. My name is James McReady. I was a ranger for 19 years, and I'm telling you this because somebody needs to know the truth. The seatco is still out there, still hunting, still waiting, and someday someone else is going to wander into its territory. I just hope they're luckier than I was. My name is Victoria Lundgren, but everyone calls me Vicky. I've lived in these North Woods for 34 years, and I'm telling you this story because someone needs to know the truth. I work as a ranger in the Superior National Forest up in Minnesota, been doing it for 16 years now. I specialize in winter rescues, pulling idiots out of snowbanks who thought they could handle 40 below without proper gear. I hold the state record for hypothermia saves. 23 people who should be dead but aren't because I got to them in time. I train sled dogs too. Emergency rescues when the snowmobiles can't make it through. Those dogs, they know things. They can smell trouble from miles away, feel changes in weather before any instrument. I trust them more than I trust most people. I'm 42 now, divorced, live alone in a cabin about 10 miles from the ranger station. People think it's lonely, but I chose this life. When I was 12, my dad died in a logging accident. Tree fell wrong, crushed him in seconds. After that, I decided I wanted to spend my life protecting people in the wilderness. The woods can kill you if you don't respect them. My grandmother was full-blood Norwegian. She used to tell me stories about ice demons and winter spirits that would steal people during the worst storms. I never believed any of it. I believed in science, proper winter survival techniques, hypothermia charts, wind chill calculations, real things you could measure and understand. That was before January 15th, 1968. The temperature hit 47 below that morning. Worst cold snap we'd seen in 20 years. The kind of cold that can kill you in minutes if you're not careful. The kind that makes your spit freeze before it hits the ground. We started getting missing person reports right away. First it was the Peterson family. Mom, Dad, 2 kids. They lived in a remote cabin about 15 miles out. Then to university researchers from Minneapolis who'd been studying wolf behavior. Finally, old Carl Matson went missing. Carl had survived 30 winters alone in his cabin. If something happened to Carl, we had real problems. My supervisor assigned me to lead a team to check on isolated residents, make sure everyone was still alive and had enough heat. Standard procedure during extreme cold events. I took Pete Carlson and Jim Oberg with me, both good men, experienced in winter conditions. We loaded up 3 snowmobiles with emergency supplies and headed out into the storm. The wind was howling like nothing I'd ever heard. Visibility maybe 20 feet on a good stretch. The cold went right through our gear, even with proper layers. My face mask kept freezing to my skin. This wasn't normal winter weather. This was something else. We reached the Peterson cabin first. From the outside, everything looked normal. Smoke coming from the chimney, lights on inside, snowmobile parked out front. But when we knocked, nobody answered. The door was unlocked. That's the first thing that bothered me. Nobody leaves their door unlocked during a blizzard at 47 below. We went inside, calling out their names. The cabin was warm. Coffee still hot on the stove. Breakfast dishes on the table. Food, half-eaten, 4 chairs pushed back like the family had just stood up and walked away. But there was no sign of struggle. No blood, no broken furniture. They'd just vanished. Look at this, Pete called from the back door. He was staring at tracks in the snow. Human footprints leading from the cabin straight into the storm. But something was wrong with them. The stride length was 8 to 10 feet. No human walks with steps that long. And the weight distribution was all wrong. Each print was deep, like something much heavier than a person had made them. But they looked human. 5 toes, heel and arch. Just too big and too far apart. Must be snowdrift filling them in weird, Jim said. But he didn't sound convinced. We followed the tracks for about 100 yards before they disappeared into a whiteout. The storm was getting worse, so we headed to the university camp. That's where things got really strange. The temperature started dropping even more. My thermometer read 60 below in some spots, while just 20 feet away it was only 45 below. The cold was moving in patches, like invisible clouds of freezing air. We found the university camp in a small clearing. 2 small tents, research equipment scattered around, but the researchers were dead. I've seen a lot of bodies in my career. Drownings, falls, exposure deaths. But I'd never seen anything like this. Both men were frozen solid, but their bodies looked wrong. Dried out, like jerky. Their skin was sunken against their bones, eyes deep in their sockets, mouths frozen open in screams. Jesus, Pete whispered. What happened to them? The weird thing was, they should have died of hypothermia first. When you freeze to death, you don't dehydrate. The cold shuts down your organs before you lose that much fluid. But these men looked like they'd been in a desert for weeks. Then we need to get to Carl's place, I said. Something was very wrong here, and I needed to understand what we were dealing with. Carl Matson's cabin was the most remote, another 5 miles through heavy forest. The storm was getting worse, wind gusting to 60 miles per hour. We could barely see 10 feet ahead. We found Carl in his rocking chair by the fireplace, dead, frozen, and dried out just like the researchers. This is impossible, Jim said, checking the body. People don't die like this, not in cold weather. That's when I noticed something else. The bodies felt too light when we moved them, like something essential had been removed, not just water, something deeper. The temperature around Carl's body was 70 below, but the ambient air in the cabin was only 50 below. Whatever had killed these people, it brought intense cold with it. I'd been a ranger for 16 years. I'd seen everything the wilderness could throw at you, but this wasn't natural. This was something else entirely. That's when Pete saw it through the window. A tall, thin figure walking through the blizzard, naked, moving against 60-mile-per-hour winds, like they were nothing. There's someone out there, he said. We looked, but all I could see was swirling snow. Pete insisted he'd seen a person walking upright in conditions that should have knocked down a moose. I was starting to think about my grandmother's stories. We tried to radio for backup, but the storm was interfering with everything. Static on all channels. Our compasses were spinning like crazy. Couldn't get a steady reading. Even my GPS unit was acting up. We need to get back, I told the others. Something's not right here. But as we loaded up the snowmobiles, Jim pointed to new tracks in the snow. The same impossible footprints we'd seen at the Peterson place. They led straight toward us, ending about 50 feet from Carl's cabin. The tracks just stopped. No sign of where the person had gone. No other prints leading away. Like whoever made them had simply vanished into thin air. Maybe they climbed a tree, Pete suggested, but there were no branches low enough, and no disturbance in the snow around any of the trunks. We followed our own tracks back toward the main trail, but the storm was getting worse. The wind was so loud we had to shout to hear each other. Even standing close together, the cold was brutal, cutting through our gear like it wasn't there. That's when we lost Pete. 1 second he was behind me on his snowmobile. The next second he wasn't. I stopped and waited, thinking maybe his engine had stalled. Jim pulled up beside me. Where's Pete? He yelled over the wind. We backtracked and found his snowmobile stuck in a drift about a quarter-mile back. But no Pete. No tracks leading away from the machine. The snow around it was smooth, undisturbed except for our own trails. Pete, we called. Pete, where are you? The wind seemed to swallow our voices. We searched for 20 minutes. But visibility was getting worse. Jim's thermometer was reading 75 below in some spots now. We were reaching dangerous exposure levels. That's when we heard Pete's voice. Help me, it called from somewhere in the storm. I'm hurt. I can't move. But the voice was coming from 3 different directions. First from the north, then the east, then behind us. Pete's voice, but wrong somehow. Too clear for the wind conditions. Too calm for someone who was hurt and lost in a blizzard. That's not Pete, Jim said, and I knew he was right. We got back on our snowmobiles and headed for the main trail as fast as we could, but the storm seemed to be following us. Every time we thought we were getting ahead of it, the wind would shift and hit us from a new direction. That's when I saw it. Through the blowing snow, maybe 50 yards away, a figure was keeping pace with us, running alongside our snowmobiles at 30. miles per hour, but it wasn't running normal. It was gliding over the snow, not breaking through like it should. The figure was tall, maybe 9 feet, and thin like a skeleton. Even through the storm, I could see its eyes, blue-white, glowing like ice in sunlight. It was looking right at me. I gunned my engine, trying to put distance between us and whatever. That thing was Jim was right behind me, but I could feel it watching us, following us. The cold was getting worse. My thermometer was maxed out at 80 below. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in seconds. We should have been dead already. That's when Jim's snowmobile died. He coasted to a stop, trying to restart the engine. I circled back to help him, but the machine was frozen solid. The fuel lines, the carburetor, everything. "Get on mine," I yelled. "We'll come back for it later." But as Jim climbed off his snowmobile, I saw the thing again. Closer this time. It was standing maybe 20 feet away, just watching us. It looked like a person, but stretched out wrong. Arms too long, legs too long, neck too long. Its skin was grey-white, covered with frost. Its mouth was full of yellow teeth, too many teeth, all pointed, and it was smiling. Jim saw it too. He made a sound I'd never heard from him before, like air being sucked out of his lungs. The thing took a step toward us, and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Ice formed on my face mask. My breath started freezing in my throat. That's when I felt it trying to get inside my head. The weakness hit me like a wave. Not just cold weakness, but something deeper, like something was pulling at my insides, trying to draw the life right out of me. I fumbled for my emergency fire kit, hands shaking so bad I could barely work the matches. The wind kept putting them out. Jim was on his knees in the snow, gasping like he couldn't breathe. Finally got a fire started with my emergency fuel tablets. The flame roared up, and the thing stepped back. Not afraid, exactly, but cautious, like fire was something it had to respect. "Stay close to the fire," I told Jim, but when I turned around, he was gone. No tracks, no sign of struggle, just gone, like Pete. The thing was circling my fire now, staying just outside the light. Every few minutes it would rush forward, and the flames would dim, as if something was sucking the heat right out of them. Then it would retreat and circle. Again, I fed more fuel tablets into the fire, but I was running out fast. Maybe 20 minutes of fuel left, then I'd be in the dark with that thing. That's when it started talking. "Vicky," it said in Jim's voice. "Help me, I'm hurt." Then Pete's voice. "It's okay, Vicky, you can trust me." Then my father's voice, the one I remembered from when I was 12. "Come here, sweetheart, Daddy needs you." I knew what it was now. My grandmother had been right. This was a wendigo, a winter spirit that fed on life itself. It grew stronger with each person it took, and it could make you hear anything, see anything, to lure you away from safety. The fire was getting smaller. I had maybe 10 minutes of fuel left. I made a decision that probably saved my life. I poured half my remaining fuel in a line leading toward the main trail, then lit it, a trail of fire stretching into the darkness. The wendigo shrieked when the flames roared up, not a human sound, but something like wind through broken trees. It followed the fire trail, trying to put out the flames with its breath. Where it breathed, the fire went out and ice formed on the ground. I ran along the fire trail, trying to stay ahead of it, but it was faster than me, putting out the flames faster than I could run. It was gaining ground. My snowmobile was still where I'd left it, 50 yards from the end of my fire trail. The wendigo was 20 yards behind me and closing fast. The engine wouldn't start, too cold. I had to use the emergency hand crank, and my fingers were so numb I could barely grip it. The wendigo reached my snowmobile just as the engine caught. It grabbed the left handlebar, and ice formed instantly where it touched. The metal cracked from the cold. I gunned the throttle and broke free. The wendigo ran after me, but I was moving faster now. At 45 miles per hour, it couldn't quite keep up. It matched my speed for about a mile, then started falling. Behind, at the county road, it stopped completely, like there was an invisible line it couldn't cross. It stood there in the snow, watching me go, those blue-white eyes glowing in the darkness. I made it to the ranger station with a core body temperature of 92 degrees. Hypothermia was setting in fast. They got me to the hospital just in time. I spent 3 days in the hospital. Lost 2 toes to frostbite, tips of 3 fingers. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. The official report blamed everything on extreme weather exposure, said Pete. "Jim, and the others got disoriented in the storm and wandered off. Happens more than people think in conditions like that. They never found Jim's body, or Pete's. The Peterson family was listed as missing, presumed dead. The university researchers were the only ones we brought back, and the coroner ruled it death by exposure, even though he couldn't explain the dehydration. I know better. I transferred to the Southern District after I recovered. Couldn't handle the cold anymore. Even 32 degrees gives me panic attacks now. I keep my house heated to 78 all winter, and I still feel cold. But I've been doing research, looking into historical records, missing person reports during extreme cold snaps. The pattern goes back over 100 years. Every 20 or 30 years, when the temperature drops below 45 below, people start disappearing in the North Woods. I've set up an unofficial warning system with some of the other rangers. When the temperature forecast shows extreme cold coming, we evacuate the remote areas. Tell people there's avalanche danger or something. Most of them listen, but not everyone. I still have nightmares about those blue-white eyes, about the sound it made when it shrieked, about Jim and Pete, and wondering if they're still alive somewhere in the deep woods, being kept alive so that thing can feed on them slowly. The hardest part is the not knowing. Did I really see what I think I saw? Was it real, or was it just the cold and the stress making me hallucinate? But then I remember the feel of that handlebar where the wendigo touched it, the way the metal cracked from impossible cold, the sound of Jim's voice calling for help from 3 directions at once. It was real. There's another cold front coming this week. Temperature's supposed to drop to 50 below. I've already called in sick to work. I'm going to stay home. Keep the heat up. Keep the lights on. And if you're smart, if you live anywhere near the Northwoods, you'll do the same. Don't go out when it gets that cold. Don't trust voices calling for help in the storm. Keep fires burning. Stay together. And if you see something tall walking through a blizzard like it's a spring day, don't stop to look. Just run. The wendigo is always hungry, and winter's coming again. My name is Francis Del Vecchio, but everyone calls me Frank. I've been a ranger in these Adirondack mountains for 22 years now, and I'm about to tell you why some areas should stay protected forever. People think being a forest ranger is just about stopping campfires and giving directions to lost hikers. They're wrong. I hold a doctorate in forest ecology from SUNY. I've published papers on predator-prey relationships. I know every trail, every stream, every deer path in these 6 million acres like they're written on the back of my hand. My grandfather built a hunting cabin up near Lake Placid back in 1952. 3rd-generation Adirondack blood runs through my veins. These mountains raised me, taught me, and nearly killed me in October of 1983. I was 49 then. Still young enough to hike 20 miles without breaking a sweat, old enough to know when something in the woods wasn't right, and by October 1983, something was very, very wrong. The complaints started rolling in during bow season. Experienced hunters, guys who'd been working these forests since they were kids, calling my office with stories that made no sense. Deer weren't just spooked, they were running in patterns, organized patterns, like they were being herded by something that understood hunting better than the hunters did. Frank, I swear on my mother's grave, old Bill Morrison told me over coffee at the ranger station. I watched a buck lead 6 does in a perfect circle around my stand, kept them just out of range, like something was telling them exactly where. I was sitting. Bill had been hunting these woods for 30 years. He could track a mouse through a snowstorm. When Bill Morrison says something weird is happening in the forest, you listen. The reports kept coming. Hunters finding their scent, drags moved during the night, tree stands repositioned, bait piles scattered in straight lines pointing away from hunting areas, and everywhere, tracks that looked like wolf prints but were 30% larger than any wolf species in North America. I'd studied every predator on this continent, published research on wolf behavior in 3 different journals. I knew what was possible and what wasn't. What these hunters were describing wasn't possible. But the deer were disappearing, not just killed, gone, vanished from areas where they'd grazed for generations. The few carcasses we found showed bite patterns I'd never seen before, precise, surgical, like the killer knew exactly where to strike for maximum efficiency. Dr. Karen Walsh joined me in early October. She was a wildlife biologist from Cornell, 35 years old, brilliant, and skeptical of everything including her own shadow. If anyone could figure out what was disrupting the ecosystem, it was Karen. "These tracks are impossible," she said, kneeling beside a clear print in the mud near Marcy Brook. "Look at the pad size, the claw spacing. This would be from a wolf weighing close to 200 pounds. Grey wolves top out around 160, I said. "Exactly. And they've been extinct in New York for over a century." She stood up, brushing dirt from her knees. "Something's been reintroduced here, Frank. Something that wasn't supposed to be." That's when we set up the cameras. The trail cameras gave us our first real look at what we were dealing with. Karen and I spent 3 days placing them along game trails, near water sources, anywhere we'd found the oversized tracks. What they captured shouldn't exist. The footage showed wolves, but wrong in every way that mattered. They ran upright on their hind legs for distances that should have been impossible. They used tools, sticks to probe hollow logs, stones to break ice on beaver ponds. They communicated with silent gestures, like they were following military hand signals. "This is unprecedented," Karen whispered as we watched the footage in my office. On screen, 7 wolves moved through the forest in perfect formation, each one exactly 10 feet from the others. Pack hunting requires coordination, but this is tactical level planning. The lead wolf stopped, raised its massive head, and looked directly into the camera. For 5 full seconds, it stared at the lens with intelligence that made my skin crawl. Then it did something that made Karen drop her coffee mug. It pointed at the camera with one clawed finger and shook its head slowly, like a teacher disappointed in a student. "Did you see?" Karen started. "I saw it." We stared at the frozen image on the screen. The wolf's eyes held awareness, purpose, intelligence that went far beyond animal instinct. That night, Bill Morrison didn't come home from his evening hunt. His wife called me at dawn, voice shaking. "Frank, Bill never came back. His truck's still at the trailhead, but he's just gone." We found him 6 hours later, 3 miles from his tree stand. The way his body was positioned told a story I didn't want to read. He'd been running fast, probably in panic, but whatever killed him had caught up without effort. The bite wounds were surgical, precise punctures at the base of the skull, between vertebrae, instant death, no suffering, professional. But it was the way his body was arranged that made my hands shake as I called for the coroner. Bill was positioned perfectly, arms at his sides, legs straight, facing away from something. When I followed his line of sight, I found myself looking at an old Mohawk burial ground, marked with weathered stones and traditional symbols. He violated sacred hunting protocols, a voice said behind me. I spun around to find Robert Thornton, an elder from the local Mohawk community. He was in his 70s, with silver hair braided down his back and eyes that seemed to see too much. "What protocols?" I asked. "The old agreements, the boundaries. Some places aren't meant for hunting, especially not by men who don't understand what they're entering." Robert knelt beside Bill's body, studying the wounds. "These marks, I haven't seen them since I was a boy, but my grandfather told stories." "What kind of stories?" "About guardians, protectors of the sacred places, wolves that walk like men and think like spirits." He stood up slowly, joints creaking. He hunted too close to the burial ground. They warned him. He didn't listen. That's when Karen screamed. She was standing 20 feet away, camera raised, pointing at the tree line. Through her telephoto lens, she'd been photographing the scene for documentation. Now she was backing away, camera shaking. "They're watching us," she whispered. "There, in the shadows, 7 of them." I looked where she pointed, but saw only darkness between the trees. Then one shadow moved, and I realized what I was seeing. Shapes that blended perfectly with the forest, standing motionless, observing. "Don't run," Robert said quietly. "Don't show fear. Just back away slowly and acknowledge their authority here." We followed his lead, moving carefully toward the trail. I felt eyes on us every step of the way. When we reached the trailhead, I looked back one final time. 7 pairs of yellow eyes watched us from the darkness, glowing like lanterns in the shadows. Karen insisted on setting up an observation blind. "If these are some kind of unknown subspecies, we need documentation. Proper scientific study." I should have said no. Should have listened to the fear in my gut that screamed danger every time I thought about those yellow eyes. Instead, I helped her build a camouflaged platform a quarter mile from where we'd seen the pack. We installed night vision equipment, telephoto cameras, sound recording devices, everything we needed to study the wolves from a safe distance. Karen volunteered for the first overnight watch, I'll radio in every hour, she promised, checking her equipment one final time. If these things are as intelligent as they appear, they're active at night. I need to see their pack dynamics in natural conditions. I left her at sunset on October 15th. She was excited. Scientific curiosity overriding caution. It was the last time I saw her as the person I knew. Her first radio check came at 9 p.m. Frank, you need to see this footage. They're using tools systematically. One individual directed the others to create what looks like a trap for deer. Coordinated engineering. 10 p.m. The pack hierarchy isn't what we expected. The alpha isn't. The largest, it's the one that seems to communicate with the others silently. I think they might be telepathic. 11 p.m. Frank, they know I'm here. They keep looking directly at the blind, but they're not threatening. It's more like ... curiosity. One of them brought me something. Brought you what? I radioed back. A rabbit. Fresh killed, still warm. It left it at the base of my tree and backed away like an offering. Midnight brought static. I tried raising her every 10 minutes. Nothing but white noise and the sound of wind through the trees. By 3 a.m., I was driving toward the observation site with a full search team. We found the blind intact but empty. Karen's equipment was still running. Cameras recording, radio functioning perfectly. Her backpack sat undisturbed, coffee still, warm in her thermos. But Karen was gone. The ladder to the platform showed scratch marks from claws, not torn or violent, careful markings, like someone had deliberately left sign. A blood trail led away from the base of the tree, drops spaced exactly 8 feet apart in a straight line toward the pack's territory. She's alive, I told the search team. Whatever took her wants us to follow. State Police Officer Mike Santos shook his head. Could be a trap, Frank. He said these things showed intelligence. Everything about this shows intelligence. The question is whether they're intelligent enough to negotiate. We followed the blood trail for 2 miles before it stopped at the edge of a small valley. The search team spread out, checking for more sign, while I studied the terrain through binoculars. That's when the headaches started. First Mike doubled over, hands pressed to his temples. Something's wrong. I feel ... pressure, like someone's pushing on my brain. Then the others, one by one, grown men trained for search and rescue, began complaining of disorientation, nausea, an overwhelming urge to abandon the search and go home. We need to leave, said volunteer firefighter Joe Brennan. Right now, something's telling me to get away from here. I felt it too, a presence pressing against my thoughts, suggesting retreat. But underneath the mental pressure, I sensed something else. Not hostility, caution, like we were being warned rather than threatened. You can go, I told the team. But I'm finding Karen. By sunset, I was alone. The pack found me as darkness fell. 7 shapes emerged from the forest in perfect formation, surrounding me in a clearing beside a small stream. In the fading light, I could see them clearly for the first time. They were wolves, but wrong in fundamental ways. Too large, too aware, too purposeful in their movements. The alpha male was massive, 7 feet from nose to tail, easily 180 pounds. His yellow eyes held intelligence that made me forget to breathe. But it was what happened next that shattered everything I thought I knew about the natural world. The alpha approached to within 30 feet and stopped. It looked directly into my eyes, and suddenly my head filled with images that weren't my own. Karen, sitting in a natural cave lined with soft moss, unharmed but changed, her eyes reflecting understanding of something vast and impossible. The pack bringing her food, water, treating her not as prey but as a guest. The images shifted. I saw the forest through wolf eyes, felt the pack's connection to these mountains that went back centuries, understood their purpose here as guardians of sacred places, enforcers of ancient agreements between the human and natural worlds. She studied us without permission. A voice spoke in my mind, clear as spoken words. Asterisk, without respect for the old protocols. But she means no harm. We will return her if you acknowledge our authority here. Asterisk, I tried to speak but found my voice trapped. The mental connection was overwhelming, like trying to hold a conversation while being struck by lightning. You know these forests, the alpha continued. Asterisk, you protect them as we do. There can be peace between us if your people respect the boundaries. Asterisk, what boundaries? I managed to ask aloud. The answer came as more images, ancient maps showing territories marked by the Mohawk people. Sacred hunting grounds that had been protected by treaty for 2 centuries. Areas where the pack maintained the old agreements, keeping the balance between human expansion and natural preservation. We are the guardians, the Alpha explained. Asterisk, when your people hunt with respect, follow the old ways, honor the sacred places, we allow it. When they violate these laws, we enforce them. Asterisk, like with Bill Morrison. Asterisk, he was warned. 3 times he hunted near the burial ground. 3 times we showed him sign to stay away. He chose not to listen. Asterisk, other pack members began to change as I watched, shifting from 4 legs to 2, standing upright with fluid grace. Their faces remained lupine, but their posture became eerily human. Intelligence and sadness filled their eyes. We were like you once, the Alpha said. Asterisk, long ago, before the treaties, before the boundaries, we chose this form to better serve as guardians. It is both gift and curse. Asterisk, how do I know you'll keep your word about Karen? Asterisk, because you will help us maintain the agreements, teach your hunters the old protocols, keep them away from sacred places. In return, we will protect the forest as we always have. Asterisk, the sound of footsteps made me turn. Robert Thornton emerged from the forest, carrying a traditional pipe and small pouch of tobacco. They called to me. He said simply, "It's time for the proper ceremonies." What followed was the most extraordinary negotiation of my life. Robert performed traditional tobacco offerings, while the pack watched in respectful silence. He spoke in Mohawk, words I didn't understand but somehow felt the meaning of acknowledgement of mutual respect, recognition of shared responsibility for the forest. The Alpha stepped forward and touched Robert's outstretched hand with one clawed finger. The connection between them was visible, a moment of understanding that bridged centuries of mistrust. Then Karen walked into the clearing. She looked physically unharmed, but fundamentally changed. Her eyes held the same deep awareness I'd seen in the pack's gaze, as if she'd learned secrets about the world that few humans ever discover. 72 hours, she said quietly, but it felt like weeks. They showed me things, Frank, the history of these mountains, the balance they maintain. We're not the only intelligent species here, and we never were. The pack began to withdraw, melting back into the forest with silent grace. But the Alpha remained, fixing me with those impossible yellow eyes. Remember the agreements, his voice echoed in my mind. Asterisk, respect the boundaries. Some territories have older claims than human law. Asterisk, the official report listed Dr. Corinne Walsh's disappearance as equipment failure and temporary disorientation in difficult terrain. She transferred to a research position in Montana 3 weeks later, claiming she'd lost objectivity studying Adirondack predators. But the truth changed everything for me. I quietly implemented new regulations restricting hunting near culturally sensitive areas, working with Robert Thornton to identify the sacred boundaries. Most hunters complained about the additional restrictions, but a few, the ones who'd been in these woods long enough to sense the deeper currents, nodded with understanding. There's always been something different about certain areas, old-timer Jake Morrison told me. Places where you felt watched, where the deer acted strange. Maybe it's better to just avoid them. I established discreet observation protocols to monitor pack activity without interference. Trail cameras placed respectfully at territorial boundaries, positioned to show whether the agreements were being honored. The footage I collected over the following months confirmed what I'd experienced in that clearing. The pack still patrols their territory, still enforces the ancient protocols. Hunters who respect the boundaries, who follow traditional practices, who acknowledge the sacredness of certain places, they hunt successfully and safely. Those who don't, well, we still find bodies occasionally. Always positioned the same way Bill Morrison was. Always near sacred sites. Always with the same precise wounds. Robert visits my office every few months, sharing traditional knowledge about the forest's history and the agreements that keep peace between worlds. He's taught me to read the signs, to recognize when the pack is active, to understand their role as guardians rather than redditors. They're not monsters, he explained during one of our conversations. They're protectors, doing what protectors do. The choice to see them as allies or enemies is ours. Industrial development threatens their territory now. Logging companies, mining interests, vacation home developers who see only empty wilderness where ancient compacts govern the relationship between species. I do what I can within the system, using environmental regulations and cultural preservation laws to protect the sacred boundaries. It's not always enough, but sometimes, when developers push too hard into protected areas, their equipment breaks down mysteriously. Survey stakes disappear overnight. Work crews report feeling watched, followed, warned away by sounds that shouldn't exist in empty forest. The pack adapts to modern threats as they've adapted to everything else across the centuries. They're still here, still keeping the balance, still enforcing agreements most people don't know exist. If you hunt these mountains, research the cultural history first. Learn where the sacred places are. Respect the boundaries that older laws than ours have established. Follow the traditional protocols. Hunt with honor, and you'll be safe. Hunt without respect, and you'll meet the guardians. Some territories have older claims than human law. Remember that, and they'll let you live. Forget it, and they'll remind you why some places should stay protected forever. My name is Miguel Santos, and I've been a park ranger in the Everglades for 16 years. I'm telling you this story because people need to know what's really out there in those waters. I grew up on my father's fishing boat in Miami. My family came from Cuba when I was little, and the water has always been in my blood. After high school, I joined the Coast Guard for 8 years. When I got out, the Park Service needed someone who knew boats and could handle the marine patrol routes through the endless channels of the Everglades. It seemed perfect, protecting the waters that fed my family for generations. At 30, I thought I'd seen everything these waters could throw at me. Bull sharks, 12-foot gators, Burmese pythons, thick as telephone poles. I knew every channel, every oyster bar, every place where the fresh water mixed with salt. The old Cuban fishermen used to tell stories about things in the water. Asterisk, cap cocky asterisk. They called them water cannibals. I always smiled and nodded, but inside I figured they were just tales to keep kids from swimming alone. I never believed in monsters. That changed in September of 1991. Hurricane Bob had torn through South Florida 2 weeks earlier. The storm surge pushed saltwater miles inland, and when it drained back out, it left the whole ecosystem upside down. Fish were swimming in places they'd never been. Gators were acting strange, clustering together instead of spreading out. The water stayed murky and dark, full of stirred-up mud and debris. That's when the reports started coming in. Captain Luis Morales was the first. Luis had been running charter boats out of Flamingo for 30 years. He knew these waters better than anyone, which is why finding him floating face down in his life jacket scared the hell out of everyone. I was the one who pulled him from the water. The bite marks on his body weren't like anything I'd ever seen. Too big for a gator, wrong shape for a shark. The medical examiner in Miami said the same thing. Rows of teeth like a shark, but the jaw was all wrong. More like a person's mouth, but wider, much wider. What kind of animal did this? I asked Dr. Martinez when she called with the results. That's just it, Miguel, she said. I don't think it was an animal, at least not one we know about. I started patrolling the areas where Luis had been found. The water was still cloudy from the storm, and my fish finder kept picking up weird readings. Huge shapes moving deep, too deep for anything that needed air. They moved fast too, faster than any fish I knew. The Park Service brought in Dr. Amanda Foster, a marine biologist from the University of Miami. She was supposed to study how the hurricane had affected the ecosystem. Young, smart, maybe 28 or so, with the kind of confidence that comes from having all the right degrees. She didn't believe in monsters either. There's a logical explanation for everything, she told me on our first day out together. We just need to find it. Dr. Foster wanted to dive in the areas where we'd been getting the strange sonar readings. I tried to talk her out of it. The water was still murky, full of debris, and something had killed Luis Morales. That's exactly why I need to get down there, she said, checking her scuba gear. If there's a new predator in the ecosystem, we need to identify it. She went down near a stretch of mangroves where my fish finder had been going crazy. 20 feet deep, then 30. Through the murky water, she found something that shouldn't have been there. Caves, lots of them, carved into the limestone bottom like someone had been digging. Miguel, you need to see this. Her voice crackled through the radio when she surfaced. There are structures down there, organized ones. The caves were full of bones, human bones, arranged in careful piles. Some looked fresh. Others had been there for years, maybe decades. They were sorted by size: arm bones in one pile, leg bones in another, skulls lined up like trophies. "This is a feeding ground," Amanda said, her face pale as she described what she'd seen. "Something's been hunting people and bringing them here." 2 days later, Roberto Vega disappeared. Roberto was guiding 2 tourists from New York, showing them the bird rookeries near Whitewater Bay. His clients were watching from the shore when something grabbed Roberto right out of his boat. They said it happened so fast they barely saw it, just a shape that moved through the water like a torpedo, man-sized but wrong somehow. It had hands, one of them told me, shaking as he gave his statement, like a person's hands, but bigger, with webbing between the fingers, and when it opened its mouth, ... He stopped talking and just stared at the water. "What did you see?" I pressed him. "Teeth, rows and rows of teeth, like a shark, but in a human face." The thing had pulled Roberto under and disappeared. We never found his body. That night, Amanda insisted on doing a night dive. I thought she was crazy, but she had that look scientists get when they're onto something big. "If this thing is nocturnal, night diving is the only way to observe its natural behavior," she said. "I'll use underwater lights and video equipment. We'll finally have proof of what we're dealing with." I wanted to stop her, but she was already suiting up. She went down just after sunset, in the same area where we'd found the bone caves. I watched her lights disappear into the dark water and waited. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Finally, her lights started moving fast, too fast, racing toward the surface. She broke the water, gasping and screaming for me to pull her up. "It's real," she kept saying as I dragged her into the boat. "It's real, it's real, it's real." Once Amanda calmed down, she told me everything she'd seen. 8 feet tall, she said, wrapping herself in a towel even though the night was warm. Standing upright on 2 legs, but built for the water. Scales, instead of skin, gills on the neck that actually worked. Its eyes glowed, some kind of natural light, like a deep-sea fish. The thing had been watching her from the moment she entered the caves. It moved through the water without making a sound, using tools, pieces of coral and metal debris shaped into knives and hooks. The bone piles weren't random. They were organized, sorted, arranged with purpose. "It's intelligent, Miguel, it thinks, it plans, and there's more than one." She'd seen at least 3 different sizes in the tracks around the caves. Adults and juveniles, maybe even a breeding population. The hurricane had disturbed their territory, forcing them to hunt in new areas. That's why the attacks had started. A week later, Maria Gonzalez went missing from a tour boat in broad daylight. One moment she was taking pictures of dolphins, the next she was gone. Just a bloody life jacket floating on the surface and tourists screaming about something that had walked on water before diving under. The creatures were getting bolder. I was patrolling alone near sunset when one of them attacked my boat. I never saw it coming. 1 second I was checking my charts. The next something was trying to punch holes in my hull with claws like railroad spikes. The whole boat shook as it climbed up the side, and I got my first good look at the thing. Luis Morales had died fighting. It was exactly like Amanda had described, but seeing it in person was different. The way it moved was wrong, too fluid, too fast. Its face was almost human, but stretched out, with a mouth that opened wider than any mouth should. The teeth weren't just sharp, they were designed for tearing flesh from bone. I grabbed a boat hook and swung at its head, but it caught the pole with one webbed hand and nearly yanked me overboard. I hit the throttle and spun the wheel hard, hoping the propeller would catch it. There was a satisfying thud and a spray of something dark in the water. The thing let out a sound like a steam whistle and disappeared. When I checked the propeller later, there was no blood. Whatever I'd hit, it had healed fast. Amanda met me at the dock, took one look at the claw marks on my boat, and submitted her transfer request that night. "I can't do this anymore," she told me. "I keep having dreams about those caves, about being pulled down and added to the bone piles. I'm a scientist, but some things aren't meant to be studied." Before she left, she shared her theory. The creatures were apex predators, evolved specifically for the Everglades ecosystem. They'd been here for generations, maybe centuries, living in the deep caves and hunting during storms when the water was murky enough to hide them. The hurricane had changed everything, altered the water chemistry, scattered their prey, forced them to expand their hunting grounds. "They're protecting something," she said. "The way they arranged those bones, The organization in those caves, it's not just a feeding ground, it's a nursery. Amanda was right about the nursery. I found it 3 days after she left, in a cave system deeper than any of the others. The water was crystal clear down there, fed by an underground spring, and floating in the darkness were dozens of egg-like pods, each one the size of a watermelon. Some were empty, some were moving. I was taking pictures when I realized I wasn't alone. They surrounded me, 6 of them, adults, moving in coordinated patterns like a pack of wolves. But these weren't mindless predators. They were organized, intelligent, and very, very angry. The largest one, nearly 9 feet tall, covered in scars from decades of hunting, positioned itself between me and the surface. The others spread out, cutting off any escape route. They weren't just going to kill me. They were going to make sure I never left their territory. I had 2 choices, fight or die. I chose to fight. The first one came at me from the left, mouth open, rows of teeth gleaming in my flashlight beam. I kicked off the cave wall and drove my diving knife into its throat. The blade went in easy, but the thing didn't even slow down. It grabbed my arm and started pulling me deeper into the cave. The water around us turned dark with blood. Mine, not theirs. I could feel my strength leaving me, my air running out. The other creatures were closing in, their bioluminescent eyes creating a constellation of death in the darkness. That's when I remembered something my grandfather used to tell me about the old stories. Estikapkaki feared only one thing, fire. Even underwater, they feared the light. I pulled the emergency flare from my belt and triggered it. The cave exploded in brilliant red light, and the creatures recoiled, their eyes adapting to darkness, suddenly overwhelmed. I had maybe 10 seconds before they adjusted. I used them, swimming harder than I'd ever swum in my life. I shot toward the surface, the flare held in front of me like a sword. The largest creature tried to intercept me, but the light hit its eyes and it twisted away, confused and temporarily blinded. I broke the surface, gasping, the flare still burning in my hand. Below me, I could see them circling, waiting for the light to die. But I was in my boat, and I had more flares. A lot more flares. I lit them one by one and dropped them into the water, turning the night into day. The creatures dove deep, retreating to their caves, but I knew they'd be back. They always came back. That was 3 months ago. The attacks have slowed down, but they haven't stopped. The Park Service officially attributes them to unusual alligator behavior following hurricane disruption. The media has moved on to other stories. Most people have forgotten that anything strange ever happened in the Everglades. I haven't forgotten. I still patrol these waters, but I do it differently now. I carry flares in every pocket, and I never go out alone after dark. I've learned their patterns. They hunt during the rainy season, when the water is high and murky. Retreat during the dry months, when their caves are exposed. They're territorial, but they're also spreading. Each year, I find evidence of them in new areas. The breeding season is the worst. That's when they get aggressive, when they attack anything that comes near their nursery caves. I've marked those areas on my private charts, the ones I don't share with headquarters. I find excuses to redirect tour boats away from them, create mechanical problems that force fishing guides to try different spots. Amanda was right about one thing. They're intelligent. They've learned to avoid my boat, recognize the sound of my engine, but they're still out there, still hunting, and their population is growing. The old Cuban fishermen weren't telling stories. They were passing down warnings, trying to keep people safe from something their grandparents had encountered in these same waters. I've started listening to those warnings, learning the old protective rituals, understanding why certain areas were always avoided. Sometimes at night, when the water is still and the moon is dark, I can hear them calling to each other from deep in the mangroves. It's not a sound any animal should make. Part whistle, part scream, part something else entirely. They're talking, planning, coordinating their hunts, and they're waiting. I'm 54 now, thinking about retirement, but I can't leave. Not yet. Someone needs to watch the water, warn people when they can, keep the old knowledge alive. The Park Service will never officially acknowledge what's down there, but that doesn't make it less real. So I'm telling you this story because people need to know. If you're planning to visit the Everglades, stay in the shallow water, travel in groups, never swim alone. And if you see something moving under the surface that doesn't look right, don't investigate. Just get out of the water, because after 16 years patrolling these channels, I'm telling you this, The Everglades aren't just home to alligators anymore. There's something else down there. Something that's been hunting these waters longer than any of us have been alive. The hurricane didn't create them, it just woke them up. And now they're awake for good. Miguel Santos retired from the Florida Park Service in 1995. He currently lives in Homestead, Florida, where he operates a small boat repair shop. He has never returned to the Everglades.